There we go. Now
Okay.
we can get the official recording going.
Okay. So
Okay.
I want to start by reading
So
Tatian, what Irenaeus says about Tatian. This is in
yes,
Against Heresies and Book 1, Chapter 28. And he says, and this is so interesting. So they deny too the salvation of him who was first created, who was Adam. So Tatian is denying the salvation of Adam. It is but lately, however, that this opinion has been invented among them, the heretics. A certain man named Tatian first introduced the blasphemy. He was a hearer of Justin's, meaning he was Justin's disciple. And as long as he continued with Justin, he expressed no such views. But after Justin's martyrdom, he separated himself from the church and, excited and puffed up by the thought of being a teacher, as if he were superior to others, he composed his own particular type of doctrine. He invented a system of certain invisible aeons, gods in the realms, like the followers of Valentinus, who was the original Gnostic, well, one of the original Gnostics. While like Marcion and Saturninus, he declared that marriage was nothing else than a corruption and fornication, but his denial of Adam's salvation was an opinion due entirely to himself. I thought that was really interesting how, so he doesn't believe Adam was saved. He believed that Adam lost his salvation and there was no salvation for Adam. So he was the first one to introduce that.
That's interesting. When I look back at Genesis, I guess Genesis isn't exactly explicit on that, but we have the book of Moses that is very explicit on Adam receiving the gospel and becoming a son of God, the regeneration. And, so that kind of, as Latter-day Saints, we can't possibly conceive of Adam being like lost or a son of perdition, but I guess maybe somebody with just Genesis might, but I'm not quite familiar with how historically, because it is kind of silent on that matter. Like,
Well, I think what we'll as we get into reading Tatian, we'll start to see how these ideas formed. And as we were talking kind of previously, is the idea of the matter being completely evil. And Adam is who brought this matter, this material world and death into the world. And so I think that Tatian was really one of the first. Well, now he wasn't one of he was he got suckered in by Valentinus because Valentinus believed in the Gnostic material world too. And so we start to see Gnosticism enter into Tatian's mind and his writings. And I think he starts to believe this idea, and that's why he becomes an ascetic later in his life.
Eric, do you have
okay.
something that you want to say? Sorry, I see it says that you have your hand raised, your digital
Yes,
hand.
yes, yes. Because I was wanting to actually say this before the group started, and it's not it it's going it's not right away. It's going to be more when we do chapter 11. I there's I've been hesitant about talking a specific topic, more specifically about um, things about wealth, that kind of things about the church fathers, and use. I'm not sure if you know this, but I am a socialist. I know Robert and Errol knows this, but I'm not sure if you knew this before. And I've been very hesitant when you talk about taxes, wealth, and that kind of thing. I've been very hesitant to bring up that kind of analysis into the group because I know that kind of subject can get really contagious. But I wanted to make sure that everybody, if will be okay if I start talking when it starts bringing up that kind of subject. Even though I think our last the book that we did before was Justin Martyr, and he talked about taxes. I was tempted to bring it up then, but I didn't. So I just want to make sure if everybody will be okay if I start bringing this kind of topic in the group.
As long as it relates to Tatian, I have no problem with it.
Yeah,
Okay.
as long as it's relevant and not like a completely tangent, a complete tangent to what is talking about. You know,
we don't want to go down any rabbit holes too far here.
Yes,
So
yes, yes, yes. I understand that,
You
which
don't
why I've
want
been
my
hesitant.
far right, you know, rabbit holes that we could go down, but as long as
Yeah.
we're focused primarily on the early church fathers and the gospel, I think that's what's most important. So,
Fair enough.
so I don't.
Tatian, I guess me and Robert were talking about this before everyone else got on the call, but just kind of biographical sketch of him. He lived in the mid second century. He was a pupil or student of Justin Martyr, and he apparently was a prolific writer, but because he fell into heresy later on in his life, that may have been a contributing reason why basically nothing he wrote has survived except his address of Tatian to the Greeks, which we will be covering today, and also his harmonization of the four gospels, which what's the word? Did you want to
The
say it, Robert?
diatessaron.
Diatessaron, which you mentioned is significant for a variety of reasons, and you thought it was interesting. It has the longer ending of Mark to it, contrary to some who think that that was a very late addition, but that shows that it's very early. It would go back to at least the second century if that, if it was in his Diatessaron. So yeah, so he fell into heresy later on, but I don't see evidence that his heretical views were in his address to the Greeks, particularly. There's some innovative views that he has, like creation ex nihilo is something that you could see in his address to the Greeks, which is he differs from his teacher Justin Martyr on. But so, for
Do you
example,
have a,
you read from Irenaeus where he fell into Gnostic views. Some say so. Clement of Alexandria also said that he fell into Gnostic views about deity, where Tatian says the words "Let there be light" are to be taken as a prayer. If he uttered it to a no, to if he who uttered it knew a superior God, how is it that he said, "I am God and there's none beside me"? So between that and the reference to the aeons, which are like demigods, right? Is what the
Mm-hmm.
Gnostic view was of the creation being done by a lesser deity rather than the Father of Jesus as the higher God. I don't really see that. I mean, there's passages in his address to the Greeks that clearly contradict that. So that wasn't something that he always believed. That must have been a later heretical view if
Mm-hmm.
Irenaeus and Clement of Alexandria are accurate in ascribing that view to him. So
Yeah,
um,
because he was known. Uh, Hippolytus was one of Tatian's students. Apparently, Hippolytus had, I believe it's Hippolytus, who had attended some of Tatian's um, lectures. So uh, we start to see how the blind start leading the blind and how these things start entering into the gospel and are entering into the church and how the church could start apostatizing here from the truth. So
okay,
I find that's interesting.
okay. I'm getting confused here. What is exactly the specific charge that you're saying that Hatation is getting apostate? I'm not really understanding.
teaching that celibacy was required in the gospel, that I mean, not just like premarital celibacy, but he was against marriage is what one of the primary charges, and against eating meat was another one. And so it's almost like straight out of the in the epistle of Paul, that says that it was a heretical view to oppose marriage and eating meat, but apparently it was something that he fell into. um Also, complete abstinence from meat and alcohol were the two things. And
Well,
uh,
the idea that Adam was not saved, that Adam was in hell. I mean, come on, that's pure. Uh,
mhm.
when you start talking about total depravity and accepting the idea of total depravity, which originated with Valentinus and the Valentinians, the Valentinian Gnostics, which Irenaeus the Valentinians is the first group that Irenaeus writes against. and he goes right down how they teach total depravity. I mean, it's very clear that they are the forerunners of Calvinism, and you start to see how others in the church start to accept this idea, and eventually you have the Tatian accepts it. You have the Manichaeans, where the Manichaeans is where Augustine came, and that's where they canonized total depravity. I mean,
But
Augustine brought the Manichaean belief of total depravity into the church, and they accepted it by condemning Pelagius. So
so it's not clear that maybe later on Tatian might have had some form of total depravity if these allegations that descriptions by Irenaeus are accurate, right? But um in his
well, I'll
address
show
to
you
the
in I'll show
his
you in the
address to the
reading
Greek.
here where he
Oh,
starts to introduce it.
oh, well, it seems like I was seeing a bunch of free will stuff
No,
in.
I
Yeah,
understand. So he believes in free will, but he's also introducing the idea of total depravity. And I think the idea of total depravity finally wins out in his mind, which is why he leaves it.
So the group that followed Tatian's kind of mindset of the heretical group were called the Encratites, however you pronounce that. So, um, and they were just like extreme asceticism, which I think is the precursor to the Montanists in the third century. So,
Now,
I
because
wish
he starts,
I wish that there's more like scholarship on the Gnostics, what they actually believe. A lot of it is like superficial scholarship, like oh they're the demiurge and all of those things, but they don't like no one really dwelt deep of what they actually thought and the different sects. I know, I know certain. I think it was David Berceau said this, or I don't remember where I got it. Um, some group of Gnostics will be like, oh, there you can do literally everything you can. There's no real. There's you can eat, drink, be lustful. Like doesn't there's no limitation. You can do whatever you want. And there's other group of Gnostics who goes the complete opposite of pure celibacy, pure like it is like they're so uptight in their belief that they don't allow marriage, which is what you're saying that Tatian has a kind of like pick up that kind of Gnostic worldview.
so the Nag Hammadi library are actually the writings of Valentinus. So the Valentinian Gnostics, we have their writings in the Nag Hammadi library. So a lot of the like the Apocalypse of Peter, I think, and I mean, there's a number of them. They even say that the Gospel of Philip is a Gnostic writing. I don't believe that. I think there's some Gnostic elements to it which they believe, but the Gnostics, we know what they believed. We have the writings of Valentinus. So uh, all we have to do is read, and they did not believe in baptismal salvation. They believed that in the pneuma, and we'll talk about this a little bit because again, when we get to chapter 12, he's talking about the Gnostics. He's talking about how the ideas from the Greeks influenced the Gnostics, and so I recognized Gnosticism as soon as I started reading chapter 12. So we'll get there.
Okay, not sure if we're going to be doing. Um, we'll be getting the chapter 12 today.
Oh, we will.
That's,
I don't have a whole lot. There's not a whole lot to
Mhm.
really discuss with Tatian. There is, but I think we can get through it pretty quick. So
okay.
I don't have anything until chapter 4. Does anybody want to discuss anything before chapter 4?
For me, is the first thing I have is Yeah, actually, chapter 4 as well. Like the first 3 chapters, I was like, they were talking about a whole bunch of different issues that it was important to their day, but I don't see how it's relevant to our day about different gods and all of that.
Okay. Errol, you have any comments?
Not prior to chapter 4. That's where the book starts.
Yep. Same here.
Okay.
So we're not in
We're,
agreement.
we're
That
going
chapter
we're going to
4.
chapter 4. Well, let Errol, we haven't heard him really talk, so
Uh, I'm in no wise prepared for today's meeting, so I was gonna actually go over these notes. I haven't even transcribed anything from Tatian. I just have an index card with all of my references to page numbers and chapters verses that I need to get back to in order to transcribe everything I read that was of note. But yeah, I'll be reading straight from the book today.
hey, that's great. Okay.
Oh, by the way,
You want to
Errol,
read?
I tried to contact you a few times, but you never respond to my messages on Facebook. Is there a reason why?
Incredibly busy. Wasn't even sure I'd make this shindig today.
I see.
Well,
Yeah.
it's great that
Well,
you're able to call on because
Yeah.
it's. I think we're
yeah, we're
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 getting
glad to
close
have
to
you.
over a year almost since our last discussion. So
Yeah. Yeah.
life happens.
Keeps
No,
happening.
actually, oh yeah, it's almost here because it was basically last summer that we discussed. Anyways, so I guess we're going to chapter 4. Go ahead. I'm gonna
So
listen what you guys have to say.
it basically says that the Father is God alone. That when we hear things like Bart Ehrman, he's saying he writes a book about how Jesus became God. This is exactly what they're talking about. This is the Father alone, and He is God alone. And I'll just read what I've got written. We could read the whole chapter. It's pretty great. In fact, why don't we do that here? I'll just read the whole chapter. For what reason, men of Greece, do you wish to bring this bring the civil powers as in a pugilist encounter or a fighting encounter into collision with us? And if I'm not disposed to comply with the usages of some of them, why am I to be abhorred as a vile miscreant? Does the sovereign order of the payment of tribute? I am ready to render it. Does my master command me to act as a bondsman and to serve? I acknowledge the serfdom. Man is to be honored as a fellow man. God alone is to be feared. He who is not visible to human eyes, nor comes with the compass of human art, only when I am commanded to deny him will I not obey, but rather I will die than show myself false and ungrateful. Our God did not begin to be in time. He alone is without beginning, and he himself is the beginning of all things. God is, in this translation, it says God is a spirit, not pervading matter, but the maker of material things and of the forms that are in matter. He is invisible, impalpable, being himself the Father of both sensible and invisible things. Him we know from his creation and apprehend his invisible power by his works. I refuse to adore that workmanship which he has made for our sakes. The sun and moon were made for us. How then can I adore my own servants? How can I speak of stocks and stones as gods? For the spirit that pervades matter is inferior to the more divine spirit. And this, even when assimilated to the soul, it is not honored equally with the perfect God, nor even ought the ineffable God be presented with gifts. For he who is in want of nothing is not to be misrepresented by us as though he were indignant. But I will set forth our views more distinctly. There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, like for for the first episode I want to discuss is when he says, God, like I have to keep in mind that I have everything in French, so I was keeping in mind to translate it in English. So when you say God is a spirit, I'm not, is there other translation that says just says God is spirit? Because one thing
Well,
I'm
when we
noticing,
start to understand Tatian's idea of spirit, he goes over this in later in his document. He's not talking about this nebulous, when he says God is a spirit, he's talking that God has a form, that God has he's made of a body that is different from ours, that it's more than just flesh and bone. So I'm thinking that from the way I'm reading is God has form, morph in Greek, um, and so the spirit is localized, just like the Greeks, just like the Jews used to believe. That the Jews used to believe that that man or that God was the Father was a localized being that looked like a man, but he just wasn't he didn't have flesh and bone like we have, or flesh and blood like we have.
so if God truly have a body, because this is something I've noticed later in his writing, where he introduced the concept of ex nihilo. God created things out of nothing, and I know that there's a few. Um, I know a few church fathers who does believe in ex nihilo, but he also don't believe that God has a body and part like Origin. Like Origin lived after Theseus or before Theseus? I always forget.
After.
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 After. So, um, so he made the argument of ex nihilo, and he also argued that God does not have a body in shape and form. But also, Tatian makes the argument. It does talk about God is a spirit, but he also talks about how God created things out of nothing, which is why the material is subordinate to the Father, to creation. So if your argument is right that he talks about that he does believe God has a body, then 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 it does not mean that ex nihilo, because that not all people believe in ex nihilo believe that God was just this. They don't have parts and body. What do you guys think?
Does he comment on the nature of God beyond saying he's a spirit, or are you just I don't
I
I mean
don't think
I is it,
he makes it explicit. He doesn't really describe it like that. It's just kind of the impression I'm getting as I'm reading, what I understand from the Jews, how the Jews viewed God as a man or as a spirit, but that the spirit stuff wasn't nebulous like it is today. The spirit, it actually had form, and it was kind of uh, you know basically you could call it energy in our words today. That it seems like the spirit was energy back then, and that God was made a localized being filled with or formed with energy and light that was so bright that you couldn't approach him or you'd be killed.
okay.
I could be wrong. I absolutely could be wrong about this. It's just kind of the way I'm reading it and the way that I'm understanding the Jewish understanding of God being spirit. Um, but I did like how he said, he says, says, I refuse to adore the workmanship which he has made for our sakes. The sun and moon were made for us. How then can I adore my own servants? We think about it, and yeah, this world was made for us. The trees were made for us. The sun and the moon were made for it. How can you worship your own servants that were made for us? you know. I did like
Mhm.
what he said there.
Yes, yes, it is. It is something that I catch on to about the idea of God is greater than everything else. Because God is greater, so why bow down to object? But if we bring that to today's um today's thinking, you can say uh, the only thing that I can think of, no, no, one it's kind of like the worship of money. It's like a lot of things that people worship today is more abstract. It is something I started to think a lot about, like the the Old Testament and New Testament and during that period. The kind of the problems that they're facing are far more real, tangible. Yes, they talk about Reagan and all that, the different gods, but a lot of the issues that they face are real, tangible issue, but not abstract issues. Does that make sense? And now today we
Like
will deal
what? Give us
more
an
with.
example.
Um, so in this passage, it was talking about things um, like people were worshiping cars. I don't know what cars, rocks and idols. They were making like physical idols. They're going to worship them and that kind of things. They literally have this kind of physical object that they worship.
With the spirit going into the object and
Yeah.
believing that it was an actual localized God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they usually have they have this like more tangent thing that they are criticizing. It's like they would pick up like, oh, you are um, worshiping this idol, or they adore the sun. These are like they can see it and they're going to believe it. However, I would pick on the atheist, for example. They don't believe that God is real because they can't see it. If they can't see it, it's like show me the evidence those things are real. It's kind of like if you argue that paganism or the atheists of that time, well, the modern day atheists will be like, unless you can physically show me that these are real, like that God is real, then I won't believe it. So it's more like a lot of times. That's why I'm saying that more things are more abstract. People falls into like errors more abstractly than physically. Does that make
Gotcha.
sense?
Yeah, it does to me. So, Jacob, this is the thing that makes me think that God is a form is in chapter 4. I read it. It says God is a spirit, not pervading matter, but the maker of material spirits. You know, when you think of material spirits, um, you know, there had to be something to spirits that made them material, but not. And then he goes on. He says,
Okay,
and
so
of the
not
forms,
pervading matter. So that would
but not
mean
pervading matter, but the maker of material spirits, and in the forms that are in matter. So he's separating material spirits from matter itself, and then uh, yeah, the material spirits can then inhabit matter, but they are separate in the sense that they do have form and localization. So
mhm.
that's where I was getting
So,
that from.
so and then they note the spirit that pervades matter is inferior to the more divine spirit,
Mm-hmm.
which they footnote in that in the Ante-Nicene Fathers, Tatian asserts spirits to be material, though not fleshly, which I think goes along very similar to what was revealed to Joseph Smith, D&C 131. There's no such thing as immaterial matter. All spirit is matter, but is more fine or pure. can only be discerned by pure eyes. That's D&C 131, verse 7.
It's a
So,
great reference. Great reference. So I think Tatian actually believed that God was a form, that he was anthropomorphic. I mean, the Jews did at this time. All the Jews believed it. So, I don't see anything that Tatian is departing from what the Jews believed at the time.
okay, that's fair. Do we have anything else on chapter 4, or do we like move on to 5?
Daryl, have anything? I'd love to hear your at least comments, Daryl, on.
No, we covered that one. I mean, we'll get a little bit into spirits versus souls in chapter
12.
13.
Oh, okay.
But
Okay.
that'll be actually the last thing that I have marked here.
Yeah, I really don't have much beyond 13. It's
No.
got a few things, but just minor.
So chapter 5 gets into the begotten, Christ's coming forth from the Father, the Logos
Mhm.
coming from the Logos power,
Yeah.
but not he came into being by participation, not by abscission. What is cut off is separate from the original substance, that which comes by participation makes its choice of function, does not render him deficient from whom it is taken. For just as from one torch many fires are lighted, but light of the first torch is not lessened by the kindling of many torches, so the Logos coming forth from the Logos power of the Father has not divested the Logos power him from him who begat him. So the, separate beings, right? It's, coming forth, and then he
Okay.
said,
So, okay. Before you go, continue on. One thing that I have a hard time understanding is, oops, uh, is when he talks about. Let me give you a second. It was like a common form. There we go. Participation done by association. That part I don't understand what he's trying to mean there.
Yeah, it's a difficult concept to understand to begin with.
Yeah.
But just like Origin teaches it, how God, or how the Word was the first to be with God, and thereby being with Him, or by participating with Him, He becomes God. So it's participation, not by, God didn't cut off something and make another God by abscission. That's basically saying, yeah, I cut off my finger and made a whole new being, and so God didn't lose anything. The Father didn't lose anything by creating the Son, and the Son became what He was by participating or being with Him.
So okay. So would you say that human beings, when we are born, I often use the that people began is basically you being born, like your mother bore you share the same essence of her. Do these writers ever say that we are the difference between human and God um, being born is that that when we're born we are separate substance from we are separating ourselves from from our mothers, or are we are we still participate in our mother's substance just like Jesus participated in the Father's substance? Do you follow where I'm going with this?
well,
Well,
they make the analogy that the early writers make the analogy that Christ and the Father are the same substance in a similar way to how all humans are of the same substance. is what I think Clement of Alexandria and some of the other writers use
But
that analogy. So um,
did
Tertullian
he ever?
specifically, he specifically in Against Praxeas says that the word has its own separate substance.
mhm.
So he says it twice in chapter 5 and in chapter 7. So that the word has its own specific and unique substance. Not unique, but he is a separate substance.
A separate
But obviously
substance.
so that there's the creation of Christ, well, I mean, being begotten by the Father, which is separate from, participating in divinity, which is,
Mm-hmm.
so obviously participation in being a deity and having the power that God possesses is a bit different than just um, being begotten by Him, right? So he's begotten by Him, but he also has the same attributes as possessing those powers and perfections, right? So
Okay, so okay, so this I know I'm going to a little bit off tangent, but this is something that I'm noticing a lot in the Paul G group, and specifically Tim Jackson. That's his last name. You know who I'm referring,
I do.
Robert, right? I got his last name right, correct?
Yeah, Tim Jackson.
Tim Jackson. Tim Jackson. Um, he's being getting the idea that there's one God, and Jesus subordination is only is humanity.
Right.
And
Yeah.
this kind yes, and in this kind of writings, it goes directly against this kind of idea. And from my understanding, is the Jesus only being subordinate to the Father only comes out of Augustine tradition. And the Eastern Orthodox don't have that kind of understanding. Like if you think about this Eastern Orthodox in the LDS versus Christian versus atheist group, that I forget his name right now. That's Eastern Orthodox guy.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Go ahead.
yeah, when
I
he
don't want to get I don't want to
goes,
call anybody's name out here anyway to give him credit. I mean, it's just,
yeah,
yeah. So,
uh,
so we're
but
going down a
but
tangent, but so
but but
the interesting thing here is that Tatian's so Jacob didn't read this, but this is for the Lord of the universe. This is the Father, who is himself the necessary hypostasis of all being, the necessary ground or the hypostasis of all being, inasmuch as no creature was yet in existence, was alone. I mean, right there,
yeah,
the Father,
that is
the necessary hypostasis of all being was alone. No, no word. It was not yet.
it is
So he basically calls or describes how the logos proceed, but um, he's a separate substance, a separate. Um, he was the first thing made or begotten by God.
yeah, which refers to my point about these Christians who keep saying, no, there's only one God, but these professors, like Tatian, literally have this semi-Aryan view that Jesus at
Mm-hmm.
one point did not exist. And it's something that a lot of those modern Trinitarian who say like, that Jesus is co-eternal with God. These early fathers are not one of those people. They didn't really believe it. So we know Tatian taught this. We know Tertullian taught this. What other the church fathers actually taught this?
Um, uh, Quite a few actually.
so
Origen says that he calls the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit three separate hypostases, and the only one that's uncreated is the Father. I mean, we can, there's a number of early church fathers that described him the same way.
Yeah.
So that's
So
pretty big. The Father was alone. Go
yeah,
ahead. Sorry.
yeah, I that's good that you pointed that out. That just like you noticed that you noted before that he's not pervading all matter.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the incomprehensible God that's everywhere at all times. So you pointed out that you could see a more traditional Jewish view of deity in that last one. That's a good point, what you pointed out in this chapter about the Father initially being alone in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you caught that. So continuing in chapter 5, he makes his point that Matt is belief in ex nihilo. He's probably one of the earliest people to advance an creation out of nothing. He says the logos, so Christ, begotten in the beginning, begat in turn our world, having first created for himself the necessary matter. So also I, in imitation of the logos, being begotten again and having been possession of the truth, and trying to reduce to order the confused matter which is kindred with myself. For matter is not like God without beginning, nor as having no beginning is of equal power with God. It is begotten and not produced by any other being, but brought into existence by the framer of all things alone. So
Yeah,
there,
that's
there,
that is definitely that is exactly what I'm saying about how he's an ex nihilo preacher. Was Justin Martyr an ex nihilo preacher?
No, he taught
absolutely
ex
not.
materia.
We covered that pretty extensively, and Errol had some good footnotes from different scholars saying it did not come within his purview to believe in ex nihilo.
Yeah. I have to really listen to that recording before because it's been so long.
Or I could just I think we have notes from the quotes in that chat, or they might have been posted in the group, which are yeah. So really great stuff. And so he's departing from Justin on this issue.
Now,
As you
see,
say,
this
he's
is what.
probably departing on other areas as well.
So
Wait
this
a
is
second.
interesting because this is what I kind of detected from Valentinus and the Valentinian Gnostics is they taught the demiurge, and the demiurge was kind of this dim-witted aeon demigod who Irenaeus actually mocks the demiurge, and he quotes Isaiah where Isaiah says, "And I alone am God." And he uses that verse directly for the demiurge, and the demiurge looked around, and demiurge was alone. He's like kind of this dim-witted being who then creates matter, and he screws it up, and matter becomes evil. Matter becomes this you could almost say embodiment of evil, that it's dirty, it's gross. Matter is just this disgusting stuff. And you're this spirit, you're this pneuma, and you come down and you inhabit the dirty, disgusting matter in the flesh, but you're still this spirit. And if you're spiritual, you'll go back up and you'll go to heaven to be with all this other spirits. And matter, you'll never be resurrected. But this is where Paul was teaching at the very beginning. That Paul, or was it John? It might have been Paul or John. Anyway, where they were teaching that Jesus didn't become in the flesh because of that, because matter was dirty and disgusting. They believed that Jesus came down and he was purely spirit, that he never inhabited this dirty, filthy matter. And
First
they
John,
condemned him for it.
it was First John chapter 3, verse 1 to 5, if I remember correctly.
Okay. Thank you.
Where so So yes, you are, and this is. I was just thinking uh, about this very specific issue of what if matter was created out of nothing, because of the Gnostics thought that matter was created out of nothing. They might not use the idea of it was created out of nothing, but the idea of if this Demeter created this matter, where this matter came from? Was
Mhm.
it was it like was it, if it's all spirit, where the matter came from? So it had to be immaterial. So it is an interesting point. And why do you say that all Gnostic were volunteering? The writings that we have are all Valentinian Gnostics. You made that point a few times.
He's one of the original Gnostics, and created some, a lot of this doctrine that I think that he got from, well, Simon Magus was also one of the earliest ones, but they got this from the Greek philosophers, which is where Tatian is going with this. He's getting this from the Greek philosophers.
Yeah, because yes, that is a important point to make, is like how a great philosopher has kind as it's all based on Greek philosophies. I absolutely agree
Mhm.
with that. Like it is not possible to get that kind of arguments made by in scripture. Nowhere is taught this. So the problem is, so you just reinforce the idea. Like the issue about the Gnostics is where did they came from? How it was developed? Because we barely have any things about them. We
Well,
know they were
so
around in the
so
first
there were
century.
still Greek philosophers, and that's where they came from. They came from Greek philosophy entering into the church, and they built their. It's kind of like a collaboration between Christianity and the Hellenic philosophy of, like, the Stoics. I mean, we get to chapter 6, and we talk about how the Stoics believe in this cycle, basically reincarnation. Um, where the resurrected bodies are, there's the consummation of all things, everything's consumed and then recycled, and this matter is recycled, and that's why matter is evil. I mean, you're leading right into chapter 6.
Yeah, I
So
guess.
so chapter 6 on the sorry, were you gonna say something else? I didn't want
No.
No.
on the resurrection. He goes over the belief in the resurrection. He seems to, while Justin Martyr makes some statements that I think imply a potential pre-existence of mankind's spirits. When we were going
Yeah.
through his writings, Tatian takes kind of an opposite view, it
Mm-hmm.
seems to be. He says, for just as I, not existing before I was born, I knew not who I was, and only existed in the potentiality of fleshly matter, but being born after a former state of nothingness, I've obtained through my birth a certainty of my existence. In the same way, having been born and through death existing no longer and seen no longer, I shall exist again just as before I was not, but afterwards born, even though fire destroy all traces of my flesh, the world receives the vaporized matter, and though dispersed through rivers and seas or torn in pieces by wild beasts, I am laid up in the storehouse of a wealthy Lord. And although the poor and the godless know not what is stored up, yet God the sovereign, when he is pleased, will restore the substance that is visible to him alone to its pristine condition. So I guess that shows the belief. He says you're not matter. Your body, your physical matter is not annihilated. He knows it appears to be vaporized to nothing, but it's God will still see where it all is and will gather it other together to do a literal resurrection. So
Yeah. But can you see how he's describing this matter as kind of this disgusting stuff where, he just he doesn't have a good view of matter, of this stuff that everything is made of.
okay, I didn't really get that from this part, but maybe later on he takes more of that
Yeah,
negative
and
view.
he describes potentiality is again, it's a hypostasis. So I'm he existed in the potentiality of fleshly matter, the hypostasis or reality of fleshly matter. I don't think potentiality is a very good translation of that word at that point. I think it existed only in the reality of matter, but being born. So hypostasis means reality.
Any other thoughts on chapter 6?
No, just that matter is going to be destroyed. I mean, in a sense, everything's vaporized. World receives vaporized matter and dispersed. I guess that's where I'm getting it from. Vaporized matter. And fire destroys all traces of my flesh. Where he just doesn't have a good view of the body, I guess is what I'm saying. And when you look at this, when he converts to his asceticism, his monastic ways of becoming a monk out in the desert, that's what they did. They just didn't have a good view of the body.
Yeah, as I'm reading this, it's like, even though fire destroy all trace of my flesh, they will receive the vaporized matter, and though dispersed through rivers and seas, and torn into pieces by wild beasts, I'm laid up in the stores of a wealthy lord. And although the poor and the godless know not what is stored of, yet God the sovereign, when he pleases, will restore the substance that is visible to him alone to its pristine condition. So he's basically saying that yeah, it's kind of like this like semi Gnostics belief about how mother is evil and it has to be wiped out, and through this destruction then God can transform it into a higher form. He can bring in a new substance that is even higher. It is not like he's purifying the substance into making it into something new. They can make it more, make a an analogy would be um uh like you melting metals, and then through the destruction of the metal you can form a new, you can mix copper or whatnot, and then you can make a new metal out of that, that forging. Initially it will be like you're destroying the building completely, all the dust, and you completely clear the rubbles, and then you bring new material into the site. That's kind of that's kind of what he's saying here, which is kind of like have this like semi Gnostic twisting into his thought. Am
Okay.
I missing uh, am I missing what you're saying there, or no?
No,
It goes on your fist.
Okay.
anything else you had in
So
there, Jacob?
On chapter 6? I
Yeah,
mean, nope, I'm ready for chapter 7's got a lot.
does. There's
yeah,
one thing I had in chapter 7. Yeah, because he talks about free will, and we'll probably get to a larger, the larger context of this, but it really stuck out in me. And the power of the logos having in itself a faculty to foresee future events, not as fated, but is taking place by the choice of free agents foretold from time to time the issue of things to come. So he's saying that, you know, he's rejecting the idea of the Hellenistic fates, the three fates that fated man, and he's saying that God still has the power to foresee the future and future events, but by free will and not by fate.
Like it's yeah, this idea of fate is very much like determinist sociology,
Yeah, deterministic. Yep.
deterministic, and it's literally again, it's one of those things how Protestant has this like they will teach that things are fated. Now, are you guys familiar with Catholic beliefs? Because they have this semi determinism sociology at the same time not, and I'm always confused how the how these two things are connected. Do you guys know how to the how you know what I'm talking about or no?
Nope, I don't. Maybe Errol, do you happen to know uh, Catholic determinism?
To my knowledge, Roman Catholics are generally more in line with the view of libertarian free will. The Eastern Orthodox.
Yeah, that was my impression.
But it's it's like whenever I find that again, I'm going to bring it up.
Okay.
But there's like this like it has to do something. Um, Ken Wilson, I remember him talking specifically about that, where because of Augustine, there's been numerous different council where sometimes they had this like determinist theology. At the other time, they don't. You have this constant battle of determinism throughout Catholicism since Augustine, because Augustine was Catholicized as a saint.
True.
So,
Not by Orthodox, though. Orthodox does
But
not treat him as a saint.
but
yeah,
with
exactly.
Augustine, he goes through phases, and so people can look at the different phases of his beliefs of free will or anti-free will and pick what they want to believe. If you accept all of them, they're self-contradict, he's self-contradicting because he clearly changes over time. So,
Yes, which is why they had a lot of debate about free will during like different Catholic councils that happened throughout ages since. That's one thing of what Ken Wilson said, which I
Yeah.
find interesting.
Okay.
so
So
I like that
Uh,
passage about free will, and I like that he kind of explains why we have free will, and it's because we're in the image of God earlier, at the very beginning of that
go
chapter
ahead and read
7.
it. Read it.
He said, "For the heavenly Logos, a spirit emanating from the Father, and a Logos from the Logos power, an imitation of the Father who begat him, made man an image of immortality, so that as incorruption is with God, in like manner, man, sharing in a part of God, might have the immortal principle also. The Logos, too, before the creation of man, was the framer of angels. And each of these two orders of creatures was made free to act as it pleased, not having the nature of good, which again is with God alone, but is brought to perfection in men through their freedom of choice, in order that the bad man may be justly punished, having become depraved through his own fault, but the just man be deservedly praised for his virtuous deeds, since in the exercise of his free choice he refrained from transgressing the will of God." So very explicit
yes,
libertarian free will.
yes, and I want to point something out. If you like, even the first phrase of "for the heavenly Logos, a spirit emanating from the Father, and the Logos from the Logos power." So in other words, this is another this semi-Aryan view where Jesus came from the Father as it is this semi-Aryan view, and the other thing that it talks about is the immortality. One thing. I remember listening to one of Dan McKillen podcasts where he talked about uh, the in the Garden of Eden, where you have the fruit of knowledge and evil, and the tree of eternal life. What he talked about is how what God, what a God is the component of no understand the good and evil, but at the same time have immortal life. By making us is saying that making us immortal is saying that we are becoming gods in this basically in this passage. That is what this kind of worldview was leading to.
Yeah, well, we're made a little,
And
that's over and over again through the early Christians that we have free will, and in that way we are like God, and that we do have freedom of choice, and that we are capable, if we choose the good, to become as He is in His nature. So,
yes, yes, which goes by the idea that the fruit of good and evil, understand what is good and evil. So if a freedom, if free will, and we have the choice to do good and evil, it goes back to what the fruit in the Garden of Eden of understanding good and evil. But the comfort that we lack is the ability to have immortality. And by doing by receiving immortality, we will becoming gods. You understand where I was going with this? Or
so
Yep.
he, on the subject of the Garden of Eden, he talks about Adam at the end of this chapter and gets into what Robert mentioned earlier, where he declares that Adam is basically his view of Adam as a demon or a devil for transgressing the commandments, right, Robert?
okay,
Is kind
Yeah.
of what I find
yes,
is fascinating is he seems to
You're
imply that
you're
there.
cutting out to me. Is that me or is that
Oh,
you're cutting out? I'm
I
wondering if that's
can you
me.
guys hear me okay? So Errol, can you hear
Is
me?
it
um,
cutting out to anybody else?
it's kind of like you briefly cuts out in and out a lot.
Okay. Um, hmm. I
Yeah.
hope,
So
is it just
okay, but
barely
you're
like,
fine now. You're fine now.
oh, I was holding my book in front of my laptop, so I wonder if that might have covered the microphone or something. So
Yeah.
I
Okay.
will not hold the book in front of the laptop. So he makes a comment that there are some who believe that Adam is declare him to be God, which I thought is interesting. That you say, I know the Sethian Gnostics held to some sort of the Gnostics believed that Adam was a creator, an aeon who was involved, one of the demigods involved over the world. So I wonder if he's referencing that or referencing something else. But he's like,
I got
what was that?
I got when I read this, I thought of more about Lucifer, not as Adam. I don't see anywhere in that passage. Like, if we read, let's see.
You think that passage is referencing Lucifer instead of Adam?
No,
Yes.
it's talking about how he became man. Lucifer never became man.
It says, and when man attached himself to one who was more subtle than the rest. So more subtle than like the serpent. Like it was often was viewed as like the subtle, the little trickery, having regard to his being the firstborn and declare him to be God. So basically, like to me, it seems like he's talking about how he Lucifer was trying to make himself look like he's actually God, though he is resisting the law of God, so basically like rebelling, then the power
I
of the
see.
logos excluded. Then the power of the logos excluded the beginner of the fall and is inherent from the fall within himself. So he's basically trying to say that that he was trying to turn away people from God and try to make him the people worshiping him.
Yeah, but then he
Um,
goes on though, and he says, "So he who was made in the likeness of God," and that's he talking about Adam specifically, because the
yeah.
entire context is, concerning the fall of man. So he who was made in the likeness of God, since the more powerful spirit is separated from him, becomes mortal. Um,
But that
and
first
it's
begotten one through his transgression and ignorance becomes a demon, and they who
yes,
imitate him, that is his illusions, are become a host of demons that through their freedom of choice have given up to their own infatuation. So I guess I can see how you're reading it too, Eric. Yeah, but so the anti-Nicene thought the translators seem to think it is referencing Adam as the firstborn. In the
yes,
footnote on one, they reference Genesis 3, verse 1 in the Septuagint. So, and men attach themselves to one who was more subtle than the rest, having regard to his being the firstborn, and declared him to be God, though he was resisting the law of God. Then the power of the Logos excluded the beginner of the folly and his adherents from all fellowship with himself. So I can see how you can read that as referencing Lucifer instead of Adam, but the translators seem to think it's referencing Adam.
yeah.
Um,
I think it's Adam, and this does fall right into what Irenaeus was saying about him eventually after Justin Martyr died, where he just taught that Adam was a demon and didn't have any salvation.
and so he who is made in the likeness of God, since the more powerful spirit is separated from him, becomes mortal, but that first begotten one, through his transgression and ignorance, becomes a demon. And they who imitate him in his illusions are become a host of demons, that through their freedom of choice have been given up to their own infatuation. So it's kind
Okay.
of
So
what the New Testament says about those who choose to be wicked and evil become, you know, become demons and become numbered with the devils, like Judas. So
okay. Here's a counter argument. Here's a counter argument. Psalm 82. It was Psalm 82 in the Bible talks about how the divine council and how these divine council, some people rebelled and started doing, they're not being upright judges and they're going to die like men. So they're losing their immortality and they became mortal and they're going to just die like men.
Yeah, but that's not
And
anywhere in the context, Eric. I mean, he's not talking
but
about Psalm 82 at all. And so we kind of
but
have to
but
understand what he's saying within the context of what he's saying and what others say about him.
but but um but I understand it. But the idea you could kind of say that the reason is because he became mortal and let's say the folly of his inherent from all fathers to with himself. So he made the likeness of God, which because of you can say he was one of the gods in heaven, but he became mortal because he started to transgress and become ignorant and become a demon, and have because of host of demons. So it's kind of like to me, kind of interpreted in the way of because of Lucifer transgressing and he started to rebel, he lost his immortality and he became immortal.
yeah,
You see where I'm coming?
that's that's a potential way to interpret it. But like Robert read at the very beginning, how Irenaeus understood it. And Irenaeus had a lot more access to Tatian's writings than what we have. And so I think it's a lot less likely that he would misinterpret him than us, I would think. I mean, I'm always open to the possibility, like
Yeah,
Jerome
yeah,
misinterprets origin on a couple things. So it's always a possibility, but he did have access to a lot more of what Tatian wrote than what we have. So
yeah, and I will and I will agree to that. It's like all I'm saying is like both. Like I agree, the way you're reading could very well be to be Adam. And when I first read it, I had to kind of read it a few times, kind of really understand what he's trying to say. But both ways could be possibility. And I'm not saying that my way is the right way, or say that both ways could be true. I'm just saying that. And what do you say about Irenaeus? Yes, could be very well true that he's also correct.
do you
I'm
happen to
just
have
saying
another
that.
translation, Errol? More modern translation of this?
Um, yeah, I don't know that it's going to shed a whole lot of light on that though. I'm reading it right now.
Yeah, it could just be kind of a more obscure passage that's not as clear as it could be, and we're just kind of left with it. But we,
Yeah. I'm just seeing that Tatian just is viewing mortality as just this evil, filthy, dirty existence, and that's why he just wants to escape it and becomes a monk. So
so there's a passage in Isaiah referencing Lucifer who tried to be God, but where is there? Um, I guess you would say maybe some of the false Baal religions would believe Lucifer's a god or something. I don't know. Satan.
yeah,
I don't know. But yeah,
in yep, that's all I have.
anything else on chapter 7?
Let's just see. What was my note again? Um,
Because in chapter 8, he starts talking about the Greeks and how, the Greeks basically teach that, all the demigods are evil. How the Greek gods are evil. They give rise to superstitions. He's going into a lot in demons, and they're not,
I
they don't have anything to do with Satan. So I'm just not seeing that, how that could be translated into that. He's using demons in a completely different context, within the Greeks in the later chapters here. So,
okay, Angel. Okay, so the one thing that I did find really interesting is how you say that angels. It basically says Jesus was created the angels and my understanding that these two things are they were separate creation.
yeah, I did.
But
I wanted to kind of bring up that he does talk about angels as like a separate species
yeah,
here. That angels are completely different from men, and that they're like a separate species. But in Greek, what's interesting, and even in the original Hebrew, is angel literally means messenger. That's all it means. It just means messenger. So, I'm trying to figure out where the creation of the idea of angels as a separate species came into being. I mean, I know we have like, the seraphim and the cherubim, but those would be a separate species. And angel just means messenger. Jesus was known as the angel of Yahweh, the angel of the Lord, multiple times in the Old Testament, messenger of Yahweh. Justin Martyr says he's another God whom we call angel. So here, Tatian specifically says that men and angels are given free will. I thought
yeah.
that was kind of
It's,
interesting.
and I remember when we read Origin, he said that um, the we don't know how angels were created. We just know that it's there. We don't know, but we don't know anything about them. So how? how is it that Origin says we don't know anything about them, but everything says that it's more like the scripture does not explain where angels comes from, nor it comes from. Some of those lines. But here, Tasha is saying that angels has free will, and it is something that is from the Father, from God. That is a very key element of what makes man and angels different
Mhm.
uh, from other creation. So, which means that they don't think that animals has free will. Am I? Can you imply this from this thing that animals in this earth they don't have free will, which is what distinguish us from from them.
Yep. Good point, Eric. Good point. So I don't have anything left until chapter 11. Does anybody have anything before that?
I have chapter 8, basically saying that History taught that God's oh yeah, all of those things in like he had this view that all the Greek gods to be real, tangible beings.
Mhm.
But the part I find interesting is that he demonized them because they're behaving like men. They're not doing God's will. As such, they're just a folly of man. Is to me? It kind of reinforce what from chapter 7 of what I'm saying about the fallen man and how Lucifer uh, and they became demon. And in this chapter, I'm gonna I'm gonna quote a little bit here. Um, but man, so you're talking about how men become apostate, and and here's a quick passage. But um, but must not but not but must not those who are spectators of single combat and are partisan on one side or the other, and he who marries he's a pederast and an adulterer who is laugh and angry and flees and is wounded, but regardless as mortals. But but for for by whatever action they manifest demand their character. By these they prompt the hearers to copy their examples, and are not the demons themselves, with Zeus at their head, subjected to fate, and being overpowered by the same passions as men.
Mhm.
So he's making this reference of these gods as he thinks that Zeus is being the leader of the picture of gods as demons, and he's following and he's so much about their folly of emotion and anger and lust and all of those things as a way um, to say that these things are real beings, which kind of reinforces my point out previously. It's verse in chapter 7, which is something that I find interesting that now no atheist would say that these gods are real, but they're mythic. They're not real. We don't think into this term that these beings are real. But
Mythological
the
beings.
but
Yep.
this mythical beings. But for them, they obviously thought they were real, which I found that very interesting. Somebody else have any other point to say or no?
No, that was
No,
good. Good point.
yeah,
Good point,
that's
Eric. I don't have anything until chapter 11. So
Okay. What about you, Jacob? And arrows.
Uh, nope, I don't either.
Okay. I do have something in for I guess I'll be talking by myself a lot for the next couple chapters because I do find yes it's um he al- he does again about fate, so we don't really have to rehash this again in chapter 9, 10. What's my note here? Oh yeah, chapter 9. He thought that fate is from the devil. So he said, such as the demons, these are they who lay down the doctrine of fate.
mhm.
So this is again a coming back of the first John chapter 3 um, about the Antichrist preachers. They viewed this kind of soteriology as from the devil. It's again um, another stab on Calvinism.
Yep. So we see where
Uh,
fate comes in because it's Greek philosophy, and the Gnostics just picked up on this Greek philosophy and ran with it.
he he also talks and another thing that caught me was how let's see my note says he also viewed how these demons taught humanity to worship animals as celestial beings. So let's see. I should have quoted. Give me a second. Uh, there we go. Yeah, for the delineation of the zodiacal circles as the works of God. So like they were talking about how he was trying to um, he also celestial for the creeping things on the earth and those that swim in the waters and the quadruple on the mountain which live in which they live when expelled from heaven. These they dignify with celestial honor. So basically, it's another thing I was saying earlier about how they view things more objectively, not abstractly like we view today. And they're made all these different objects as celestial being the as if they're actual divine. We don't have this kind of idea anymore being taught.
By
It's so
the
it is so
by who?
like by if by atheists by Christian by we like I'm not maybe the Hindus still view that. Yes, some people believe in the 12 zodiac sign. They're like, oh, it was my horoscope today, but but we don't actually think by reading the horoscope you're actually going to get those things like get those things. You kind of like we the majority of believe that these things are not true. They're they are superstition. We don't actually think them to be actually true, unlike
Mm.
them in the past. It's like this is something. This is something that keeps popping up to me. Is like how how they think that everything that they believe are actually real. Just like Tatian believes that Zeus was actually real in that time, but now we don't view it that way. They actually believe that they believe that
I'm going to push back a little. I don't know that Tatian actually believed they were real. I think he was acknowledging that the Greeks believed that they were real, but I don't think Tatian did himself. I'm not getting that
but for
from
me,
anywhere.
for me, you view those gods as demons. If demons
Well, okay,
and
I can see your
and
point, but being a demon and being actually like doing those things is a kind of a different story. I mean, like you can believe in the demon teaching those things and like being um, a real being representing like Zeus and things, but not that Zeus actually did those things, if that makes sense.
not exactly.
Well, okay, so if it's a demon, how can a demon actually physically do the things that he's claiming that Zeus did? Because demons don't have physical bodies to be able to do the things, the sins that Tatian is claiming that Zeus did. Zeus is, he's claiming that Zeus slept with his daughter, and how does a demon actually sleep with a daughter?
Well, well, it kind of comes back to um, well, this is something that's really prevalent in the Book of Enoch, and I know that the New Testament taught about the Book of Enoch to be scripture and all that, and I in it it goes back to Genesis. In Genesis where it talks about how the sons of God took on a bride and a giant, a giant roamed the earth. That was back in that's which led to the flooding of the earth.
Okay.
I'm seeing that the Zeus and all of those different kind of gods were kind of like following this kind of idea. They're back, and I know in the Book of Enoch they go on much more greater length about how some angels came down on earth and kind of introduced some forbidden knowledge, and they fornicate with men and that kind of things, and they seeing and you kind of have that same idea being implied with Zeus here.
So you're thinking that Zeus was an actual person who lived back then, based on a mythological creature based on an actual man, is what you're thinking?
I am thinking is I'm thinking there's some sort of element. Okay, I'm thinking that what Tatian believed, and that doesn't mean I actually believe it, but I think what Tatian believed is Zeus was real and actually have interaction because scripture because they thought things like in the they believe that like in Book of Enoch to be scripture where it taught that that angels took men as marriage and actually made children with them, which is kind of like reflecting the idea of what Zeus was doing, was what Tatian was critiquing Zeus is doing and referring him to be a demon. He believed that Zeus was real, and and he's calling Zeus a demon, not a god.
Okay, I'm just gonna have to. I don't see it personally, but I can see where you're coming from, I guess, but I don't see that Tatian believed it personally. I think he just recognized that the Greeks believed it personally, but I could be wrong. You could be right. So who knows? But
Okay. Um,
anything in
also
chapter
said that
10? because he just keeps
Uh,
mocking the Greek gods. I mean, 8 through
yeah,
10
yeah,
is
yeah.
just
I don't have chapter. No, nothing chapter 10. It's the chapter
okay.
11.
So Jacob, is this where you had anything in chapter 11?
Let me look. Oh, think. Let's see. No, nothing else.
Okay, I just had he talks about free will, and he says we were not created to die, but we die by our own fault. Our free will has destroyed us. We who were free have become slaves. We who have been sold through sin. Nothing evil has been created by God. We ourselves have manifested wickedness, but we who have manifested it are able again to reject it. So, again, this is confirming what he said up above about the, we have the ability to reject sin, not just because, because we aren't totally depraved. We can choose to do good. So,
Mhm.
So,
but I thought
So
interesting.
I don't think that was a total depravity statement from him though. It is
No, no,
there is depravity. That's something that early Christians, said was introduced through the fall, but it's not necessarily a complete depravity because he says we chose to sell ourselves into sin, but we can also choose to come out of it. That's through the atonement.
So this is where free will differs from what his idea of total depravity is. When I say total depravity, I'm not speaking of taking away our free will, but what total depravity does is it's just this filthy, dirty, material, totally depraved world that we live in. The matter is just totally depraved in the sense that it's good for nothing but to be destroyed. Um, so to me, total depravity and free will are two different things within Gnosticism. And of course, Calvinists combine them today where they take away free will, saying that matter is so evil that we don't have the ability to even do anything good. He was saying, that we still have the ability to choose good, but that the matter is just this filthy, disgusting stuff that we live in, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, that makes
but
sense.
your expectations believing that we live in this total depravity nature, but we still have the freedom to choose. That's what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah. We have the ability to resist sin, but that that matter itself, that it's called Heil. Heil is the matter, and it's just evil. It's the personification of evil, the materialistic view of evil. It is evil materialized. And so everything to do with the flesh is evil. And choosing to resist the evil, by loving your neighbor and serving them and doing things, you can resist the evil. But marriage is evil. Having sex is evil. Having kids is evil. It's just, and because it creates additional material things, additional hyle. And when we get into the, chapter 13, we talk about, we'll see the psychics and the hylics, which he brings up. So, so there is free will, but it's within this material, disgusting, filthy world.
Yeah, yeah, I see a point. And it kind of like it reminds me of the Armenian standpoint. Is it like, yeah, they agree with total depravity, but they try to say, oh well, we cooperate in God's grace. So he's kind of like doing that kind of twisting. And yes, I remember David Burso saying how the how the nature of soul and spirit it get literally merged together in the Reformation. So they no longer have this distinction of what is what is a body, soul, and spirit. They all get merged together. While Tatian has still have this idea they're separate. Another point for me is I wanted to mention is under the beginning of the paragraph where he says, "How then shall I admit this natively according to faith? When I see much manager of faith, I do not wish to be a king. I'm not anxious to be rich. I decline military command. I detest fornication. I'm not impelled by an insatiable love of gain to go to sea. I do not contend for chaplets. I'm I'm free and it matters for fame. I despise death. I am superior to every kind of disease. Grief do not consume my soul. I'm a slave. I endure servitude. I am free. I do not make a boast of my good birth. I see the same summer is for all, and all death for all, whether they live in pleasure or destruction. The rich man sows, and the poor man partakes of the same sowing. The wealthiest die, and beggars have the same limit to their life. The rich lack many things, and are glorious only through the estimation they are held in. But the poor man and he who very moderate desire, seeking, seeking as the seeking as he does only the things suited to his lot, more easily obtain his purpose. So, recently I quoted this whole passage is that it really emphasized how the how Christian despise at that time they always despise wealth as a way that the rich, the kings, all of those things they really hate this idea and they need to give up wealth and you should be like the poor man. You should not wage war because all you're doing is promoting the interests of the empire. One thing, and this is one thing I will critique the church, is they don't have the sense of hatred of wealth, of military conflict. We should be peaceful. We should not wage war. We should not seek fortune and wealth. We're just going to make ourselves miserable. That's the point I wanted to make.
Errol is smiling. Looks like you got a comment.
Oh no, it's I've stirred the pot on those issues plenty.
Okay. So chapter 12. And do you have anything? Where's your next comment, Jacob?
Let me look. I didn't take notes on it. I was just going off of memory. Let's
I'll be honest. I didn't really read anything beyond chapter 11. So, so yeah.
It was a difficult read, actually. I struggled going through this. He has a lot of, I mean, the Greek philosophy that he goes into, I understand some of it, but he was a Greek philosopher. I mean, he studied under Justin, and they knew Greek philosophy like the back of their hands, and we're trying to enter into the context of that with our limited understanding. So it was hard.
Yeah, Tatian actually studied Greek philosophy at greater breadth and depth than even Justin did. So he
Yeah.
was kind of steeped in it. But it's
Yeah.
important to recognize the effect that this has on the early church.
Yes, absolutely.
So okay. So I was just reading the first part. Like I just read from all the way to after the separation was made. So there was a lecture that I was listening to from David Burso that specifically did about spirit, um, the spirit matter, and souls. So one thing that I'm seeing is the best way to describe it is using our LDS doctrine. We the in the primordial existence we were spirit. We had we this and we came from the Father. We were born. We were spirit. Then we became when God created the world, we get the matter, and our soul got encased into this matter that was corruptible, and it caused us to sin. Was also the spirit of God, which was saying the greater verity of spirit, is also there influencing on us. It's basically like God is whispering to us um, to do the good, while our flesh is trying to cause us to sin. This is what I am. And the matter came to matter because of God, but is inferior because it's not pure from the soul, the spirit of God. Does that make sense or no?
Well, it does. And when we read chapter 12, it makes better sense, and I'll explain it. So this is the beginning of chapter 12, and he says, we recognize two varieties of spirit, one which is called the soul, which in Greek is psyche. Okay, so psyche is the soul, but the other is greater than the soul. Now, what he's talking about, the greater than the soul, is the pneuma. That's the spirit. An image and likeness of God both existed in the first men. In one sense, they might be material, which he calls helokoi, which is the hyle, the matter, the material, and in another, superior to matter. So, which is again the pneuma, the spirit. The case stands thus: we can see that the whole structure of the world and the whole creation has been produced from matter, and that matter itself brought into existence by God, so that on one hand it may be regarded as rude and unformed before it was separated into parts, and on the other hand, as it was arranged in beauty and in order after the separation was made. Therefore, in that separation, the heavens were made of matter, and the stars that are in them, and the earth and all that is upon it in similar constitution, so that there is a common origin of all things. So he's saying that, so this is really where I recognize the Gnosticism and the idea of the psychics. The psychics are the ones who can overcome matter with their mind. Okay. The Hylics are the depraved, the ones that are just, they give in to their material desires. Uh, you know, they just have no desire to do anything other than just sin. So the Hylics are the depraved. The psychics are those who Irenaeus, when we talk about Irenaeus and the Valentinians. So the psychics are those who can overcome the evils of the world with their mind. But then the pneumatics are even higher, and the pneumatics are the ones who are spiritual, and they can overcome the evils of the material because they're spiritual. And so when we read it, the Valentinians, and how the Valentinians believed that that they were just, that when Achamoth gave them the seed of spirituality, they were spiritual, and nothing that they could do, they could ever, not become spiritual. They were spiritual, they were pneumatics, and they couldn't lose that. There was nothing that they could do to gain it, that they were given to them by grace alone. They overcame the material world by grace alone, and it was given to them by their goddess Achamoth. And if they had that seed of spirituality, they would automatically be saved, and nothing they could do. They could sin all they wanted, and they couldn't ever lose it. But Irenaeus talks about the psychics. The psychics are the animals, and they can overcome their material existence through baptism, through water baptism, becoming going through the steps of salvation taught in Christianity. They were the psychics, and then the Hylics were just the depraved who are just created just to be destroyed. So we see that this idea, this concept, is coming into Tatian's writings as he's talking about these things, and he's addressing it. But you can tell that he's also not really addressing it. He's just kind of he's thinking about it, and which I think led him into his errors. And I think I lost everybody.
No,
Sorry, I was looking at something else.
But does that make sense though about the psychics and the Hylics and the pneumatics and the different levels of the Gnosticism beliefs?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're kind of saying that because of the different levels, he's trying to say that bring that same concept between the Father and our spirit.
Yeah, he's trying to bring this in, these ideas into the church here.
And why would be a bad thing?
Because the pneumatics were automatically saved. If you were a pneumatic, you basically you could do anything you wanted and still be saved. They didn't believe in baptism. They believed salvation by grace alone. They believed in a monergistic grace, that if you had the seed of Achamoth in you, that God automatically saved you, and you overcame the flesh by the Spirit. So when you receive the Spirit, you're automatically saved from the flesh, and you go to heaven no matter what. Who does that sound like today?
Calvinist.
More than just Calvinists. I mean, Martin Luther, Lutherans. It's basically virtually all Protestants. All Protestants believes to varying levels of this.
True.
Very few Protestants actually believe water baptism saves.
It is true
That when you receive the Holy Spirit, you're saved. You don't have to do anything. God saved me by his will, by his grace, by this monergistic grace. Spirit came down upon me. I have the Spirit. You don't, because you are just a degenerate, and you Mormons are going to hell because you don't have the Holy Spirit. But I do. I have the Holy Spirit because I was chosen. I was predestinated to before the foundation of the world to receive it, not you.
Yeah. Yes. It's this is one thing about Protestantism is there's different levels of this determinist theology, but some of them are worse than others, and which is why this is an argument I've been saying for a while. Gnostics has many different dominations. They're not all this. They were not all the same. just like the Protestants are. They're not all the same, but they have some of those basic concepts that are similar, where they build upon each other.
Right.
So they're like a lot of times they will say, but we agree on the essentials. What are these? Oh, the five solas. Okay, let's go for the essential of the Gnostic will be, oh yeah, the demiurge, the the matters is evil. You can argue those are the essentials doctrine that Gnostic believe, but then they have different views. Like I know there's some Gnostics, they were baptizing people, um, which uh, uh, which which I know that some Christian rejected their baptism because they didn't have the authority to do so, which is kind of the same thing what the Protestants are doing.
Yep. So Protestantism comes right out of Gnosticism. We can see that just beautifully.
Well, cool. Anything else in Tatian we want to discuss before wrapping? I mean, you said we didn't have a whole lot of notes on the later parts.
I don't. Let's see. There's 13, which is talks about the soul's immortality. Again, that's the psyche. So the psychic, or when we think of our psyche, we think of our mind, and so their soul was their mind, I guess, and that it's not possible for their mind to die, because he says the soul is not in itself immortal, O Greeks, but mortal. Yet it is possible for us not to die. If indeed it knows not the truth, it dies and is dissolved with the body, but rises again at last at the day of the world with the body, receiving death by punishment in immortality. But again, if it acquires the knowledge of God, it dies not. Although for a time it be dissolved, it itself, it is darkness, and there is nothing luminous in it. It basically sounds like he's saying that when we die, we go to sleep, and the psyche just kind of does nothing. Kind of like is it the Seventh-day Adventists that believe that you die, you just go to sleep? Yep. Or is it the Jehovah's Witnesses?
No, Seventh-day Adventists believe in soul sleep. Jehovah's Witnesses believe in the annihilation of the soul, and the soul is brought back into existence.
Okay,
or not.
So they're kind of similar, but
yeah, they're unconscious
Tatian's,
in both cases.
Yeah, Tatian's kind of going along with the same theory here, of soul sleep, and so if you know God, then you'll be raised with Him at the end of soul sleep, and if not, well, you'll just have a death by punishment and immortality. So it's kind of an eternal hell. He brings up eternal hell here. And I found it interesting, his conversion, jumping to like chapter 29, 31. But yeah, he was an interesting guy. Interesting read. Difficult to get through, but do you have anything more, Jacob?
Nope. Most of my thoughts were on the earlier chapters. So,
how about you, Errol? What's your overall impression of him and your understanding of Tatian?
Let's see. Yeah.
Oh, your sound cut out. Can't hear you.
Uh-oh. How about now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Be careful with the diatessaron. It's generally not viewed as authentic in its current state. So even though it does cite the ending of Mark, we can't really hang our hats on that one. So don't be over dependent on that. This is probably almost certainly the only full authentic work of Tatian that we have at this point. He's an interesting case study in the effects of the apostasy. Especially when he goes directly counter to his own teacher. That's a problem. And when he was Orthodox, that was great. But they slipped little by little. If we had more of his writings, it might be more like observing Tertullian gradually slip further and further into Montanism. We had more of, because Tatian did write more, and maybe if we had that, we could see him slip gradually further and further into the Ankratites' form of Gnosticism. But this is it. This is all we have because, again, like I said, after he was condemned, there were only 2 writings that were really upheld for any period of time. This being one of them. So, yeah, it's fortunately it's not too long because the latter half is just him dogging on the pagans. The early Christians like to do that a lot. You learn a lot about paganism from the early Christians because there's so much to critique. So there is that.
Yeah, so you didn't miss much not reading past chapter 11, Eric.
No, not a lot that you missed out on there.
Do we know where we want to move on to after now that we've
I would
done
like to
Tatian?
throw out, I would like to discuss against Praxeus. I would love to discuss that one.
Do we want to jump to Tertullian next?
I'm currently reading Origen's commentary on Matthew in small doses as time permits. Yeah, so it might be a while before I have time to commit to, and actually, Oxford University Press is coming out with the Philokalia of Origen late this year.
What's it called with the word?
Probably going to be in Origen land for a little bit here.
What about Clement of Alexandria? Does Clement entice any of you guys?
Yeah, Christ the Educator is pretty high on my list of places to go to. But I got to wrap up Origin.
So are you okay? So how? Okay, so how about this? What if we read along with your Origin?
Yeah.
Would that work?
Do we as a group want to go back to Origin after that was kind of where we spent our first year on?
Well, I like Origin. I love the guy.
I love Origin just as much as the next guy, but
But
I wonder if Clement might be something of value because he precedes Origin. He's kind of in that end of the 2nd century territory where he's still very close to those apostolic fathers. He's not directly under them. He's probably he probably fits as a good right after Tatian, where Tatian's someone who's taught by Justin, and he comes in the period right after Tatian. So
So I misspoke when I said it was Hippolytus. It was actually Clement of Alexandria, who is the one who visited Tatian's lectures. So Clement actually listened to Tatian. He was kind of like Tatian's disciple. So it might be interesting going to Clement of Alexandria for that reason.
So is Tatian being Justin's disciple? Could that be used very loosely? Because Clement seems to just say he was one of his hearers, that he heard Justin. So
well, the quote I read at the beginning about it from Irenaeus says a certain man was a hearer of Justin's. And
so hearer, how far does that go?
Yeah, I would say that it's a disciple if you're a hearer.
he was an admirer of Justin because
Okay.
Justin was an intellectual. Justin was into philosophy. Tatian was into philosophy. Tatian wanted to be an intellectual. Tatian wanted to be admired himself.
Okay.
Justin didn't seem to
Okay.
have that kind of aspiration, but that's still what he got from the church. And I think Tatian wanted that as an aspiration, which is probably part
So,
of his misstep.
okay. My question to you, Errol, you don't really want to do any works other than Origin until you finish Origin. Is that correct?
So right now, my goal is essentially to finish off everything from the Oxford Early Christian Texts series and be done with it. And the only thing that I have left currently is Origin's commentary on Matthew. I've gotten through everything else from that entire series. And if I could just finish that off, that'd be great, because that means that the only thing I have to finish is the Fathers of the Church series, and there's a ton of variety there for me to just start throwing up votes on, like, what are you guys most interested in? And then I can finish off that series. And then by the time I'm finished with that, whatever hasn't been translated into a more modern contemporary translation, I can then lower myself to going back and doing just strictly the Anthony Fathers, because there's still plenty of writings there that you're not going to get anywhere else. And that's just how it is. And sometimes you have to
So
paraphrase.
is the instructor called Christ the Instructor? Is that what that longer title is for
Yeah, you could
Clements?
translate it either way, Christ the Educator or Christ the Instructor. So in the Fathers of the Church series, it's Christ the Educator, but in Anthony Fathers, it's Christ the Instructor, or just the Instructor or the Educator. It's abbreviated as sometimes. That one is, I mean, I really want to read the Stramatas, but we'll be doing that like forever.
Yeah, that goes on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a book. So he if I remember right, so Clement of Alexandria wrote 3 major works, like in a trilogy. I'm trying to remember what they were. It was the exhortation was the first, the instructor or the educator, and then the Stramata. So those are his 3 works in like I say, in a trilogy.
Yeah, he's got some really great stuff apart from that. Who is the rich man that shall be saved? Was a pretty good one to touch on what Eric was saying earlier. If you want some more of that, you can get that from Clement of Alexandria. That one's a short read. Stramatos was like a series of 8 books, and he just meanders all over the place. It really is miscellaneous. It lives up to its name.
One thing I like when reading through Clement of Alexandria is there's so much in the Alexandrian school on the plurality of gods in both Clement and Origen, but Clement is almost even more so than Origen. He mentions it quite a lot. So in my readings of Clement, so
Yeah, I mean, he was Origen's teacher, so there is that.
yep. He also was one of probably the last early church fathers to defend, considered orthodoxy to defend the eternity of matter, right? He's the end of the second century, beginning of the third, and he's probably the last one to really defend that in his writings. So,
And even then, it's probably less explicit than in some of the others that we have that precede him. Yeah,
he's pretty explicit in some passages, but he's not as I guess it's not like a focus of him as some of
right.
the.
Yeah. Yeah.
So okay. So what? So the bottom line.
I'm sure we can
What do
discuss
you want?
this in the chat over. Maybe
Yeah.
we could even do a poll in the group of what people want to move to next.
For
So
me, I am neutral. It's all up to you guys.
Okay.
If you guys want to Clement, if you guys want to go to Clement Alexandria, so be it. If you guys want to go with Origin, so be it. I really don't care.
All right.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, guys. This was it's always great to hear from different scholars like you. So love it.
It's great to have part of the group back together. Well, most of us, a couple guys couldn't call on, but it's good to have the chat going. And I actually had a friend be like, I haven't seen anything uploaded in the Upholds YouTube channel for a while. I'm like, well, that's because we haven't done anything in a while. So
Okay. So when do you guys want to make? Okay, so when do you guys want to make, do it on the next video? Do you still want to do it like once a month?
I think that's pretty optimistic. We're not going to be able to do it once a month. So,
Yeah, no.
well, we'll discuss it.
Yeah, I'm pretty swamped. Errol seems pretty swamped, so um, I was glad I was able to make it today. I'm glad that everyone was able to make it today. So
More frequently than
When
annually would be good.
yeah. So when do you guys want to try to meet up next time?
Well, let's do a poll in the chat and see what we want to discuss next, and then let's go from there. So,
Okay.
all right, awesome.
good.
Well, you guys have a great rest of your weekends.
You too. Take care.
Harold, I have a question for you, Harold. That series that you were talking about, is it where are you doing it? Because I would be interested to read to be part of that if it's possible or not.
The Oxford Early Christian Text series.
Yeah.
Yeah, I buy those from Oxford University Press, and I don't think you want to be part of that because
That's
the
an
price tag.
expensive.
It's in the thousands, Eric.
Okay, yeah. So personal, yeah. For now, it's a little bit out of question.
It's in the thousands. Errol has spent thousands on his books.
Yeah.
Yep. The downside is if I ever have to move, I'm not excited for having to pack up,
Yep.
all that. So
Books are heavy,
I
man.
kind of have the same. I kind of have the same issue with me. So
That's
I
okay.
keep buying new
Missionaries are
books
strong.
too. So
They'll haul your books for you.
all right.
All right. Take care, guys.
Okay. Bye.
see ya.